Welcome in, Hokies fans, to this edition of the Tech Sideline podcast. We record on Thursday, April 7th, and it's been a while. We got a lot to catch up on. In episode 232 of the Tech Sideline podcast, we're going to give you some updates on some things going on around TSL. We'll also look at spring football and how that's coming along with just over a week until the spring game, and then we'll go around the horn, updates on softball, baseball, and men's basketball in the second half. All of that and much more coming up on episode 232 of the Tech Sideline podcast, which starts right now. We welcome you into episode 232 of the Tech Sideline podcast, however you are listening, whether that's on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, or Stitcher, or if you're on our YouTube channel. If you are, we ask you to like, comment, subscribe, and turn notifications on so you know when the Tech Sideline podcast goes live every week. Also, be sure to leave a comment or question for Will and Chris if you are in the chat. We'll get to those with David at the end of the show. As always, the Tech Sideline podcast brought to you by the Southeast Regional Training Center. You can help bring Olympic hopeful athletes to Blacksburg. Visit southeastrtc.com to learn more and donate today. And some big news. Next week, the podcast will for sure be brought to you by the Southeast Regional Training Center. We're going to have Tony Roby on the podcast as well. That comes up next Monday. Be sure to look out for that. We got a great crew on set today. Will Stewart, founder and general manager of Tech Sideline. He is across the way. To my right, Chris Coleman, lead analyst and columnist for Tech Sideline. In the fourth chair today, our managing editor, David Cunningham, going to give us some insights on some spring football, softball, baseball, men's basketball as well. Malcolm Stewart behind the scenes, our greatest podcast producer in the land, and I'm your host, Jake Lyman. Guys, it's a big day, exciting day. Masters first round already underway, opening day later today. And I want to start with this. Bill Roth going back to the broadcast booth. He will be the new, or I guess the old and new, radio voice of Tech football coming up in the fall.
Touchdown Tech. Bill Roth coming. Wait a minute.
Meet the new, what was it? Was it saying?
Meet the new boss, same as the old boss.
Meet the new announcer, same as the old announcer. I love it.
Yeah, so Bill Roth coming back. Bill and Mikey back in the booth. Who thought it would ever happen again? But he will be the voice for football, and also he'll be on the TV broadcast for the spring game next week. So anybody who's not in town can listen to Bill Roth there, and then once again in the fall. But first, want to start with some TSL updates. Obviously, the big news over the last few days is the Justyn Mutts Poster deal. The posterizing dunk over Paolo Banchero has now been memorialized in a actual poster, and Justyn Mutts has signed 750 of those. Those are available right now. That's just a great deal, and obviously showing the changing landscape of NIL over the last few years.
Sure, but first we have to cover the really big news, which is Chris's new red shirt license plate.
Yep,
hanging
that's
over his
amazing.
head, so
We've been saying
Right
we want to get the red flashing lights whenever Chris mentions red shirt, but I guess this will do. The personalized license plate.
Malcolm's got something ready to go. Whenever
Even
Chris
has
talks
Tech
about it.
Sideline stickers on it too.
Right,
the license
right.
plate.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And the Tech Sideline garden flags behind him as well. A little bit of accenting around Chris.
So if you're wondering about that, you're wondering how we got that. I don't know if people know this, but you can buy sample plates from the Virginia DMV. I don't know why, but their website's called dmvnow.com, which I think is a bizarre name. Why isn't it virginiadmv.com?
As opposed to DMV later.
Or DMV next week, or
It's usually DMV later.
So
Yeah.
you can go on there and you can pick any one of their specialized. I can't remember what they call those plates, commemorative plates or whatever. And that's $20. So
It's not bad.
and you can have anything put on it that you want to. It doesn't matter what people do and don't have driving around out there. And so for $20, got that shipped to us, and it was quick. It was 2 weeks. Not like the regular DMV functions, which take quite a bit longer. It was just a couple of weeks. So nice piece of eye candy there. So anyway, on to the Mutts thing.
Well, yes. So we got the red shirt behind Chris finally. But how did this deal come to fruition, getting Justyn Mutts? Obviously, when you saw that, Liam Smith made the wallpaper and all of that. But now we've got the poster. They're signed. How did this all come to be reality?
So it started with, I'll try not to hog too much of the show because I know we have a lot to talk about, but this is actually a really interesting topic. So it started with when we had a crew go to the ACC tournament up in Brooklyn. and Liam Smith. David, Liam graduated last year, right?
He's a year older than me, so
Okay.
he graduated 2 years ago.
Yeah. So Liam was a photographer for 3304, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's got experience shooting sports photography. So we sent him up there to shoot the ACC tournament. And when Mutts dunked on Bancaro with about 2.5 minutes left to go in the final, the championship game, I think Liam got probably the best photograph of it. His positioning was right up, he got a really good picture of it. It's framed really well. He got 2 or 3 pictures, but one of them is really good. So, when Chris and I saw it, the gears started.
As soon as we got in the office that Monday, we were like, "You thinking what I'm thinking about, about that picture?" Yeah.
And so we talked about it on the well, first of all, after the ACC tournament, we were all worn out because it was just But once things settled down, I think we talked about it on the podcast about making a poster out of it, but we hadn't really done any work on it. And I got an email shortly thereafter from a guy named Al. I think it's pronounced Bicer. And Al and his 2 brothers own Bison Printing in Bedford, Virginia. Turns out that's a huge operation. They got like 70 employees and a big building and everything. And Al was like, I'd love to help with that. So one thing led to another. And ordinarily, Bison Printing is what's called a B2B business. They print for other businesses. So this sort of making something available for consumers was a little bit of a challenge for them. And it took us 2 weeks to get the whole thing put together. Now, conceptualizing it was pretty easy. I talked to people on the message boards, and I said, what would you pay for a signed limited edition print? If Mutts signs this photo, what would you pay? And it's funny, the day crowd hovered around $50 or $60, and when the night crowd got home, they all said $100. So we went to the high end and we set it at $100. And so we conceptualized all this, and we got on the Hokies Exchange platform, and I sent a contract to Mutts, and I laid the numbers out. So, we're selling the signed prints for $100, and we want him to have as much of the money as possible. So we set him at $70 per $100 print. And we also, Liam actually owns the photo, and he did a great job. So we wanted to cut him in on it. We gave him some royalties. The printer's got to make his money. So Mutts makes most of the money. The photographer makes some, the printer makes some, and Tech Sideline basically breaks even. This is not a profit center for us. So we conceptualized all that stuff, and I sent the contract to Mutts. And I know the heat that Tech Sideline can bring. I know we're talking major bucks. And so I'm like, he's going to be so pumped to see this. And like a day went by, and then he messaged me back, and he was like, I am sorry, but I cannot sign the deal at this time. So I started going kind of nuts. I was like, what? Because we put a lot of work in on this project, and it was a big deal. It just turns out that he and his family were just making sure that everything was structured the way they wanted, because those of you that saw the Storm Murphy podcast, you know that Storm was wearing the T-shirt of the dunk. And there's a whole story there I won't get into, because the T-shirt was made from the same photo. So anyway, Mutts had that deal going, and that had already been launched. So the family just wanted to make sure that whatever we did with the poster did not interfere with the T-shirt deal that he already had in place. But in typical young person fashion, or maybe this was legal advice, all Mutts said was, I can't sign it at this time. He didn't say why while they talked things over. So finally we got some back and forth going and figured things out, and the attorneys got everything all taken care of. And the whole time I'm thinking, T-shirts are nice, but I know what's about to happen here, and I'll get to that in a minute. I knew we could sell a bunch of these things. And so we finally get things all lined up. The contract's all signed. We got a contract with Liam, the photographer. And so we launched this thing Monday. It's Thursday. We launched it Monday at about 11:30 in the morning. And just boom, 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 boom. They started selling like crazy. So I just got the numbers. So let me put this in perspective for you guys. So 3 days and an hour or two, we've sold 401 of the signed prints. So you do the math on that. That's 40,000 in gross revenue. Mutts gets 70 per poster. It's 28 grand. And we're also selling an unsigned poster that's cheaper that he makes money from. So he's approaching $30,000 in just 3 days. And so yesterday, Justyn came to the office and we drove to Bison Printing to do the actual signing. And we would have liked to have taken pre-orders longer, but he's going home to New Jersey to spend some time there, so his schedule was short. So we go to Bison Printing, and at that point in time, they'd sold something like 380 of them. So we make the call, we're going to have him sign 750 of them. And that was a process. So so when we get there to the printer, the first thing they do, and Malcolm, if you can start going through the photos on the video, the first thing they do is they take you in and they show you what I believe is called a press proof that the customer has to sign off on. Yeah. So we go in and we look at that, and that's a real neat setup. And Justyn's the one who actually has to sign off on it. And the press proof, if I've got my terminology right, Al will be mad at me if I don't, is just 2 of the posters side by side with some other data on them. So we have Mutts look at them with the little magnifying light thingy, and then he signs off on them. And so we're ready. They're ready to print and sign. So they printed 1,500 of them. Wow. So they wheel them into this room where we're getting ready to sign these things. And of course, they take the pair and they cut them down the middle, so you have this stack. And it was kind of humorous trying to figure out the process. Now on the poster, so let me, for those watching the video, I'll grab the poster and hold it up and show it. Up in the corner, there's a dark area that just lends itself perfectly to signing. So Justyn puts his signature there, slides it down the table to me, and I number it 1 through 750. That process took about 2.5 to 3 hours, with bathroom breaks and stuff like that. And the rhythm of it was really cool because in the time it took him, I told him before we got started, he's got a good signature anyway. He's got good handwriting and he has a good signature. I said the biggest thing people need to be able to see is the J and the M, and the rest, So he did a little thing that I thought was very cool. He would do the J and the M really quickly, and he would meticulously write number 25 on that. And the time it took him to do that was basically the same amount of time it took me to write 1 out of 750, 2 out of 750. So we're just doing these things, and so that was fun. So unfortunately, because Justyn had to drive to New Jersey right after the signing, he and I did not get to travel together. So I didn't get to spend a lot of time with him just kind of riding in the vehicle and talking about stuff.
We don't know whether he's coming back or not.
Yeah, don't ask me that question. So somebody at the signing asked him that question, and he just kind of gave it the, we're thinking about it. We're looking at everything, et cetera, et cetera. And so when he arrived at the office, so he followed me. I drove the company van. He followed me. When he arrived at the office, Mutts drives a 2005 Honda Pilot. So the car's he's only 6 years older than the car. It's an old vehicle. It's got a dent in the back, and he got out and I made a joke about, you're going to be able to get a new car now. And he goes, no, I think I'm going to invest it. Wow. So in between him signing the proof and us starting the actual signing, we had about an hour and we ate lunch. And he spent that entire hour asking us about investing, what we knew about it. At one point, he even asked the question, what would you do if you were me? What would you do with this money if you were me? Now, he's no dummy. He knows taxes are involved. His family knows taxes are involved, and they're going to take 25 to 30% of that, whatever. So he knows to make that calculation in his head. And when he asked the question, what would you do if you were me? I said, well, how you choose to invest the money is up to you and your family. But one piece of advice I will give you is buy yourself something, whether something nice, whether for you that's $500, $1,000, $2,000, get yourself something, treat yourself. Yeah. And, then be smart with the rest. He was asking us about how he asked Al how they started the printing business. He was asking about starting businesses and things like that. So that's where his head is, you know. And I know there's one other story I was forgetting to tell him. This is it. He said to me at one point, so I asked him about the T-shirt. I said, how's the T-shirt going? And he told me, and the numbers are smaller, you know. And I said, okay, you know. And he said, it's not like this though. This is a lot. And he looked at me and said, when you told me that I could make over 20,000 doing this, I didn't believe you.
Yeah. And
I was like, well, and so that led to this whole conversation of, and I don't know how this is going to sound. I said, well, you know, Tech Sideline's a 25-year-old business. We've been around a long time. We have a large subscriber base. We do 50 million page views a year. You know, we're a very serious business. And I said, but you know, when I watch young people and I see how they consume social media, for example, through their phone, that's a lot of their window into the world. Tech Sideline doesn't have a TikTok account. Mm-hmm. Nobody's dancing on our TikTok account. We've got the Tech Sideline username reserved, but we don't use TikTok. We don't post silly memes. You know, we don't do videos on Instagram. And I said, so yeah, there's a lot of young people out there that aren't aware of us because we don't conduct ourselves like that. But we are large.
But the people who are willing to spend money know about us.
Yes, they're with us, and they've been with us a long time, you know. And so to kind of wrap this whole thing up, because I don't want to eat up the whole podcast. It's been a lot of fun to do this. And someone said to me, this is what NIL is intended for. It's not intended to put together these bogus deals to entice recruits. Of course, that's the way people are going to use it. You know, even the NCAA is not that stupid. Yeah. But when you look at something like this, it shows people that NIL can be fun. Getting a signed poster of Mutts is fun, and there's all kinds of fun things you can do around NIL. And it can be a vehicle for an athlete who has accomplished something to be rewarded. You know, Justyn and his teammates accomplished something, and he is not bearing the fruits. I don't think that's the phrase I'm looking for. He's benefiting from it. This is, to me, true NIL. And even people on our message board says, you know, the way a lot of schools are using NIL is sleazy, but I like this. You know, and then the last thing I wanted to say about that is, I know that Tech fans have been nervous about NIL because they see the rumored thing that Texas A&M did was where they just threw $30 million into a pot and they're going to supposedly hand it out to, you know, whoever's on their teams. And Tech fans see that and it makes them nervous because, you know, typically Virginia Tech doesn't have alums that throw that kind of money around. But one thing that Virginia Tech does have is a very, very strong, loyal fan base. And there's a lot that can be what I would call crowdsourced in terms of NIL. If you are a Hokie fan and you think that Virginia Tech can't generate some good NIL opportunities, yes, they can. And it's not one person giving $30,000 or whatever it winds up being to Justyn Mutts. It's a whole bunch of people, and they're getting something for what they're putting in. So I really think this kind of resets the discussion and gives people other things to think about.
Yeah, you know, the narrative amongst the fan base all the time for years and years and years now is, okay, this team cheats and Kansas players get Adidas deals and who knows if they'll have to forfeit their national title and everything like that. And we can't compete with that.
And UNC doesn't have to go to class. Well, they play for national titles.
Well, guess what? Like, what Kansas and Adidas did is now going to be legal in the future. If Adidas wants those players to go to Kansas, they can just promise them that they're going to sign them to an endorsement contract as soon as they set foot on campus, and boom. So this is a legal way for Virginia Tech to compete with things that the fan base said always said we could not compete with.
If you felt worried or powerless, well, you're
not powerless anymore.
Every fan who bought a $100 poster, it was their opportunity to take control of the situation and have some power. In
Right.
the situation.
And you know whether or not this isn't about whether Mutts comes back or not. I mean, maybe he will, maybe he won't. I don't know. I hope he does. But it's also something that Mike Young can tell recruits. Say, look, one of our players had a big time dunk in the ACC finals, and they got a really good picture of it, and they sold.
Cha-ching.
They sold. You know what? 401 and counting. Right.
Yeah.
And it's
and
only
there's
the sales
350 more available.
The sales only been going on for 3 days. So you know, and so Justyn Mutts made $30,000, or I don't. Maybe it ends up 35 or 40.
Or
I
40,
don't know. But you know, it can only be a positive for Virginia Tech recruiting.
Yeah, and it's awkward to sit here and say on a podcast that thousands of people will listen to and watch exactly how much money is going to Mutts, but it serves a purpose. It sends a signal.
You know, and he said it was okay to put those numbers out there.
I asked the family.
We wanted to make it very clear to the fans exactly how much he was making. First of all, that it wasn't a profit center for us, that we were breaking even. But we really wanted to show the fans that, you know, you can potentially make a difference.
And this isn't us doing it. It's the fans that are doing it.
Exactly.
And I think in the future, this just changes the game, not just for men's basketball, but for all sports.
Right.
I mean, imagine if a women's basketball player has a game-winning three-pointer, or a soccer player, game-winning goal. I mean, there's so many opportunities across all sports. If softball ends up going to the College World Series, I mean, like there are, you know, and each of these is a different kind of portion of the fan base. You know, like softball has its own little collective of people. Wrestling diehards. You know, imagine if somebody got a great shot of Mackay after he wins a national championship next year.
Right.
Like, these are the kind of opportunities that Tech Sideline, because of what this has done, it now shows that this is possible. And I think it's something to build off.
And here's what I would do, and I don't know for sure if this is legal, but who the hell knows when it comes to NIL? Nobody knows anything, right? You're the Virginia Tech Nike contract expert. How much does Virginia Tech, from a monetary standpoint, get paid?
$12.
Serious number.
Gosh, let me try to remember the details of that contract. It was roughly $2 million a year, and the vast majority of that was equipment. Jerseys and things like that.
So how much actual cash does Virginia Tech get?
There was like $100,000 or $200,000 in cash, and that was it.
Okay.
Yeah. Now that contract is expiring. It's expiring in mid-2023. That horrible, terrible albatross that has been around Tech's neck for almost a decade.
If I'm Whit Babcock, I'm telling Nike, look, don't give us any more cash. Sign all our basketball players to NIL deals.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if you caught the news release or not, but Adidas actually is sort of, for every Adidas school, Adidas is offering the opportunity to make NIL money repping Adidas. Now, what that means is that, let's say some Adidas school has a popular women's volleyball player. What that means for her is she can put a link to Adidas shoes in her social media, and if you go click and buy, she gets credit for that. Mm-hmm. It's not as if, at this point anyway, that I think Adidas is going to be paying every athlete $10,000 or $15,000 a year.
No, I don't think so.
But that's a decent idea that Chris just had.
I mean, $200,000. Even if the next Nike contract they happen to pay us $1 million in cash, you're talking about an athletic department that's it's over $1 million now in revenue.
$100 million.
Over $100 million. That's my Austin Powers moment when he comes back 60 years
$1
later.
million.
Yeah. That's a drop in the bucket these days, and I think that money could go to could benefit in other areas.
I like that idea.
Yeah, because imagine if you have high profile recruits now that you just have Mike Jones on staff, a really good recruiter. You know, and this goes not just for basketball, for all sports, but you have now an opportunity to showcase that, okay, imagine if Nike does sign all the men's basketball players to NIL deals. And it's kind of that thing where if somebody wants to buy something Nike related, they go to a player's profile and some of the proceeds go to them. That benefits both Virginia Tech, the student athlete, and that's something you can pitch to a recruit. And
Absolutely.
I think that it benefits the entire party.
So back to the thing of NIL being fun for the fans. The NIL stuff is starting up at Virginia Tech, and we've talked to the people who are running it, and they've got some great ideas that are going to be so much fun for the fans. Just think about, like, all of you parents out there who your 10-year-old kid was a big fan of Deron Washington or Dax Hollifield or whoever. Well, you just kind of had to buy a generic jersey, and maybe you could go to some event where they'd sign it. No, you're actually going to be able to buy your kid, in a perfect world, we'll see if this stuff develops, a Dax Hollifield poster that the kid can put on the wall, a Deron Washington poster, and there'll be
and personalized jerseys.
and a lot of other really cool items and things that are going to come down.
And they could do Cameo or something like that, where they make money. You know, if a 10-year-old loves Dax Hollifield, he can make them a little video for their birthday or something like that.
I think
Storm Murphy
just signed
yeah.
up for a thing like that. So if you want to send your kid a birthday message or for Christmas next year or whatever, you can sign up, and Storm Murphy will personalize that message for your kid or for whoever.
So these are the kind of opportunities that are going to be available for fans that haven't been available, and that creates that emotional tie that really resonates.
Mm-hmm.
And the Justyn Mutts poster deal, obviously really cool for Tech Sideline to be able to execute it. Justyn, obviously a big deal for him. And then the fans, you get to help out Justyn, and also you get yourself a signed poster of one of the biggest moments in Tech basketball history. So
and we could not put ACC champions or anything like that. We tried to make that poster like you didn't want to infringe on any copyrights or trademarks or anything.
Well, very cool. And you can still get these posters on techsideline.com.
Well, what you want to do, let's see. I will admit that I haven't really threaded the promos for the posters into our site very well
We've
yet.
sent them through emails.
Yeah, I mean, we've sent them through emails. If you look at our Twitter in particular, you'll be able to find it. It's, if you've got a good memory, it's TSLNIL.bisonprinting.com.
We could go to the article on the site.
We could also put the link in the description of this YouTube video.
Yes. So it'll be in the description of the YouTube video. It's on Tech Sideline Twitter at Tech Sideline, and also in the article.
In the articles, which you can find on techsideline.com.
Yeah.
So
just Google Tech Sideline.
You could probably just Google Justyn Mutts NIL and
poster.
Plenty of ways to find it. If you're still looking for a Justyn Mutts signed poster, plenty of ways to get to that link. Very cool opportunity. Now we got a lot to get into around the other aspects of Tech athletics. Let's start with spring football. We are 9 days away now from the spring game in Lane Stadium next Saturday. So I know that David and Chris have gotten to see, and Will, you got to see an open practice as well.
I've been busy with that poster deal.
He got to see the full
one. Yeah. So all of you guys have gotten to see kind of what Brent Pry's first spring football looks like. What have been your general impressions of what you've seen from the team so far?
A lot more arm talent in the quarterback room. I mean, you think about last year, Burmeister was playing with a bum shoulder, and I believe it came out recently that he also broke ribs against Notre Dame. So
I think that was rumored, yeah.
You're throwing shoulders, hurt, and you got broken ribs. You're not going to be able to throw the ball, right? So, and then his backup for most of the year was Kadum, who now plays for McNeese State. Yeah. I mean, Virginia Tech did not have much arm talent on that team last year, but they do now. Wells can sling it, and Brown's got a good strong arm too. But there's nothing wrong with Bullock's arm from an arm strength standpoint, and I've been impressed with Devin Farrell.
Yeah,
Devin Farrell is a guy I didn't know a lot about because he never posted any senior film on Huddle or anything like that. So I had no idea about his arm strength or anything like that. But what little I've seen, he seems capable to me. So
and he'll mature and get bigger.
So improved arm talent in the quarterback room is the number one thing that stands out to me. The other thing that probably stands out to me is the position changes.
Yep.
They're really, really trying hard to find the right position for guys. And while I'm on that,
so Chris has got it written down.
While I'm on that subject, Connor Blumerick is playing a tight end / wide receiver role. He's going to be catching the ball.
He's Taysom Hill
this year. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's an ideal role for him. I think he should have pretty good ball skills. I mean, these days, quarterbacks aren't up under center doing that. I mean, they have to catch the snap every time. So they have to have decent hands at least.
And you would think maybe some trick plays in there. You got a guy who can at least competently throw the football.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things I asked Jason Brown about it and Grant Wells about him yesterday, and one of the two said, this is a guy who could catch an 80-yard post route and then the next play go throw a 5-yard slant.
Yeah.
Like
his ability to be dynamic can kind of change a lot of things.
Somebody told me he housed a 60-yard tunnel screen recently.
Wow.
In practice.
We haven't seen that since the Michael Stewie days. For you youngins, you don't know. That goes way back.
So let's see. Other position changes. Jordan McDonald to defensive end. His twin brother Jaden to will linebacker. The practice we saw, they were Jaden was the number 1 Sam and Jordan was the number 2 Sam.
Yeah.
So Jordan's a defensive end, and he played there some on the scout team last year. Him and Jaden both did, actually. And Jaden is now the will spot, which is the short side linebacker, the boundary linebacker. If you want to compare it to the past Tech defense, he would be aligned as like a backer,
right?
Like a Xavier or DB.
So do you know off the top of your head how big the McDonald's are?
So they're listed at 6'4", 215. Everybody ignore the weights that are listed on the online roster because they haven't been updated since last August.
They're probably closer to 230 or 240 now, you think?
I don't know about that, but I don't know. I mean,
they're not 215.
It's really hard to estimate weight on people that are really tall sometimes.
Who are far away.
Yeah, exactly. I think Jordan's probably a year away from really contributing to defensive end because I do think he needs to add a little more size and strength. Jaden's going to be playing on the short side of the field at will. So they both moved from the Sam spot, and so you got 3 brand new players at Sam. You've got J.R. Walker, who was a safety previously. You've got Keonta Jenkins, who was a safety previously, and you got Kelly Lawson, who was a wide receiver. And the Sam is the wide side linebacker.
Field backer
is what they'll call it. It's basically like Virginia Tech's old whip position, except it's a traditional linebacker. Virginia Tech never really played a traditional linebacker at whip. He was always a nickel back type. Now it'll look like Virginia Tech's 2004-2005 defense with James Anderson playing the whip role, who was a traditional linebacker. But after Anderson left, Tech didn't have any more traditional linebackers in that role.
Well, and he was a freak athlete that at that size. He
played a long time in the NFL. Yeah. So, I mean, if I had to bet, I would bet that Jenkins will win that position. But I don't know. I mean, they keep moving guys around. I mean, for all I know, there will be somebody else at that spot at the end of the year. It's like we expected. They're just moving guys around because they think they're a better fit somewhere else, and the spring's the time to experiment. I mean, so we could see more changes.
Yeah, in fact, I don't know if I've said this on a podcast, but they used to put the freshman football players' names in tape on their helmets. Yeah. And this staff put every player's name in tape on their helmets.
They also used to shave the heads of all freshmen.
That was easier.
Every single one of them.
So that you could tell when they didn't have their helmet on.
There was another position change this morning with Bryce Goodner moving from offensive guard to defensive tackle. We noticed that in the open practice session this morning. Gunnar Givens has slid inside from defensive end to defensive tackle. He's been banged up a little bit. I don't think he's a full go right now. Whether he plays in the spring game, I'm not sure. But if he stays on defense, defensive tackle is his long-term position, in my opinion. I still think he's an offensive lineman, but we'll see. Lakeem Rudolph also moved to defensive end. Now, this is a guy who was about 195 or 200 pounds when Tech signed him. He actually got hit by a car at one point in high school, and that affected his development and everything. So I think he enrolled at Tech, around 210 or so maybe, and then he was a safety. He actually played a little bit as a true freshman on special teams 2 years ago, but that didn't count. So he was a true freshman again last year, and he got up to 227 pounds at that point. So they moved him to linebacker, and he redshirted last year as a linebacker. Ding, ding, ding. Proper decision. Now he's 240 pounds, according to the coaches. And, Fuente and that staff, they kind of wanted to move him to defensive end last year, but they're like, man, we literally just moved him to linebacker 2 weeks ago. We don't want to have another position change for him. So he redshirted as a linebacker. Now he's a defensive end. Those are the position changes that I wrote down. Can you think of any other off the top of your head?
The one today, Bryce Goodner.
Yeah, I mentioned that.
Oh, you mentioned him. Yeah. No, I think that covers pretty much all of them. And here's the funny thing. Brent Pry's like kind of tried to tell us about him, but it also hasn't been straightforward. It's like, hey, what are the position changes? And
right.
We move these 3 guys around. It's you move Kelly Lawson to across the.
I don't think he wants to talk about him unless he's fully committed to the move, because some of them might just be for like one practice just to see how a guy does.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
I think when he comes out and announces the Connor Blumrick moves, it's because that's a done deal. He knows that's gonna stick.
Yeah, well, in talking with the quarterbacks, because that's who we got to talk with this week. We got to talk with Tyler Bowen. Brent Pry, obviously, but Brad Glenn, the quarterback's coach, and listening to them talk with, after talking with Connor Blumrick and stuff, he's going to play wide receiver, tight end. But from what it sounds like, he can be a matchup problem out there. And I'm really interested to see kind of what he brings, because we know that, there's Caleb Smith and Jaden Blue kind of in that wide receiver room, but a lot of unproven guys behind him. So I think that like just the position changes and kind of seeing who can move around and have an impact at a different spot is kind of the thing that jumps out the most to me. But that's what they've been doing, over the past 3-4 weeks, and every Monday they have a meeting where they kind of decide, okay, who needs to move. So and I think I told you before this, Jake, but like we might be able to get a chance to go watch them scrimmage on Saturday, so that'd be something new to see, actually them like going at each other. But
and I would not expect Blumrick to like have his hand in the dirt when we say tight end. I actually have written down here tight end / wide receiver, because I think he's going to be technically listed as a tight end, but I know he's been working some with Fontel Mines, and tight ends don't catch tunnel screens like I was talking. Now, I didn't see that with my own eyes. It was somebody else who saw it who told me. So.
We don't think he's going to be blocking defensive ends.
Don't think he's going to be blocking defensive ends. I do know from that open practice we saw, Virginia Tech started that off with a competition drill between the wide receivers and the DBs. And basically it was a jump ball competition in the quarter of the end zone. And like the DBs won almost every round.
Yeah. Wow.
But because Tech doesn't have really... Like Caleb Smith's a big guy, but Tech doesn't really have a big guy who's naturally going to go up and be Damon Hazelton is your best example, or Isaiah Ford, a guy who's just going to go snatch it out of the air over a defensive back. Maybe that's a role he can play. Is he's 6'5", man. Maybe he's that guy in the red zone, and then between the 20s, he's somebody else.
It's interesting you bring that up, and Kelly Lawson's size, and yet they move him from wide receiver. And
Pry was already familiar with him because Pry knows the Sherando coach, because Pry recruited. Tech had a linebacker from Sherando. He was a 4-star recruit the year before Dax Holyfield. And he had to give up football because of neck injury. He actually started at backer, and then Dax took his.
I can't remember who it is.
But anyway, he was originally committed to Penn State before decommitting from Penn State to commit to Fuente and Tech, and so Pry knows his high school coach.
Dylan Rivers.
Dylan Rivers. Why couldn't I think that? I kept wanting to say Chase Williams. That was 5 or
that was much longer ago.
That was 10 years ago. Jeez. Anyway, so. Pry is familiar with the high school coach. They had a lot of conversations with it, and Pry went back and watched his high school film and talked to the high school coach, and they both think he's a better defensive prospect than offensive prospect. We'll see, and because there's competition. Keontae Jenkins, I think, will start there at Sam. I mean, if the season started tomorrow with these 3 guys at the position. I definitely think Jenkins would start there. And considering the lack of depth at outside receiver for the Hokies, that you would have to think a guy like Lawson would have a chance to get on the field there earlier. But I'm at the same time I'm happy. They wouldn't make that move unless they felt it.
Now, is that one they announced, or do you think they're just experimenting with it and might go back?
I don't know. David, did they actually officially announce that, or did somebody just notice it?
Who?
Kelly Lawson.
Oh, no, they ain't. He announced it. Well, that's why I brought it up, because he announced he mentioned, yeah, we moved Keontae Jenkins and JR. He's like Walker, Jenkins, and Lawson, and Andy Bitter and Mike Nislak and I all kind of did double take and said, like Keely Lawson, like the wide receiver, and he's like, yeah. So so he announced those are the guys he announced. The one that they never announced was Goodner. Yeah. And we just saw Goodner practicing at tackle
yeah,
today.
they might have just decided that this morning or last night.
So that was the one we hadn't heard of, but all the other ones Pry is told us.
And I like it because it shows a dedication to the long term. Brent Pry's not thinking about, oh God, I need to win X number of games this year, so let me leave Lawson at wide receiver for now because he's actually got a better chance to get on the field there this year than at linebacker. He's thinking about long term, which I think is the proper way to build a program with where Virginia Tech is right now.
So we got a lot of developments, more arm talent in the quarterback room. I believe they announced yesterday Jason Brown and Grant Wells, as expected,
separating
are kind of
himself.
They're the top tier, followed by Bullock and
Devin
Farrell.
and Bullock.
We've got shuffling pieces on defense, lots of movement over there, and Connor Blumrick. Let's say he moved to weapon. He's playing.
We'll call him weapon.
He's playing weapon now. I want to quickly touch on running backs. Let's talk red shirt. Blair the red lights and Will's man crush from this class. Bryce Duke, based on what I've seen on Twitter, he's been impressing, but do we think he's going to redshirt this year?
Generally, when you watch these practices, now we don't get to see them go through scrimmages. It's literally just quarterbacks throwing to receivers, and there's no defenders there. It's just air, right? So last Thursday when we were at practice, I believe the top 4 who took reps. You know, the whoever's number 1 on the depth chart that day goes first. Whoever's number 2 goes second. Blah blah blah. So number 1 that day was Jalen Holston. Number 2 was Malachi Thomas. Number 3 was Chance Black. Number 4 was Bryce Duke. Today, Malachi Thomas was number 1. Chance Black was number 2. Jalen Holston was number 3. And Bryce Duke was number 4.
Okay.
So that's 2 weeks in a row Bryce Duke has been number 4. So he's in the conversation for sure, which is all you can ask for a true freshman at this point who is supposed to still be in high school. So the fact that he appears to be ahead of some of those other guys, there's too many redshirt freshmen and freshman running backs in there to all stick. You know, there's going to be some attrition.
Well, does it feel like the rest of that group outside of those 4 may be looking at position changes, possibly transferring?
I think you have to. You've got to get down to the 85-man scholarship limit. Nobody wants to be the 9th string running back, right? Or the 8th string running back, or the 7th string running back. To be quite honest with you, so yeah, there's definitely going to be attrition there. They've been impressed with Keshawn King's playmaking ability, but like last week during the open practice, like King was like going last in drills, and today he was not in the top 4 in drills. So it seems to me that like he's a guy who makes plays but is not a consistent player, if that makes any sense. So I think they maybe have thought about taking a look at him as maybe like a wide receiver slot type. Certainly he can return kicks, and I think they've taken a look at Chance Black there too. But the fact that Chance Black was actually the 2nd guy through drills at running back today shows me that right now they view him as a running back. Yep. So there's still a lot to shake out, and there's another scrimmage on Saturday, and then they'll have another meeting, and maybe there'll be more position changes heading into that final week before the spring game.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to note that when we got a chance to talk to Stu Holt before the Louisville game, he said ideally he would like 6 running backs in his room. Okay. So you're thinking...
Doesn't mean all of them are going to play.
And that does not mean all of them are going to play, because he did say, you know, ideally he'd like to have a guy, but, you know, you're going to feed the hot hand. But that, you know, you would think that means attrition, position changes, you know, and like Chris said, Black and King were 2 guys that Pry and Tyler Bowen kind of mentioned as guys that were potentially going to, you know, looking to see if they could play somewhere else.
I think the ideal number for me at running back is 6, with one of those being a walk-on. All right, so you have, and you're never going to be able to hit this every year, but 4 running backs, and then one guy redshirting, of course, and then like an emergency walk-on. So you have 5 guys available, so you don't have to burn that red shirt. That would be my ideal scenario.
So certainly a lot to work out in the running back room. More than 6 there right now. So we'll see what changes in the next few months. Before we move on from football, we have our first commit to the 2023 class and Brent Pry. It's Lance Williams, offensive lineman, 3-star coming in. General impressions of the first commit to the class.
He's going to be the most photogenic player of the entire class, and he was first because he's got that long hair.
Oh, yeah.
He's got that Jake Johnson hair.
Yeah.
It looks like Thor. An offensive lineman who looks like Thor. Yeah.
Maybe we got a nickname
and Dex
for him
tells
already.
me that the ladies love the long hair. He's quite adamant about that.
No, I think he's a guy. You have to give both staffs credit. He had a very, very close relationship with the previous Tech staff. He's taken 3 visits to Tech, and I know at least 2 of them, maybe 3, came with the previous staff. He camped. He's done a junior day. I think he came to a game last year. I think he was a guy that Virginia Tech was going to get regardless.
Yep.
Now Joe Rudolph got here and looked at all the guys that Tech had offered for the offensive line, decided to pursue some of them, decided to not pursue some of them. But Lance Williams is one of those guys who was re-offered by Virginia Tech after the coaching staff change. And I'm at the point, Joe Rudolph, Wisconsin offensive lines.
Yeah.
If he's good right now, if he's good enough for Joe Rudolph, he's good
Whatever
enough.
he wants. So he's from Alcoa, Tennessee. Do we know right off the top of our head how far away Alcoa is?
No.
Can you look
I
it up,
don't.
David? David's on it.
He's actually got an offensive lineman teammate that the previous staff had offered as well. So that must be one heck of an offensive line.
Yeah.
But I don't think Rudolph is really
250 miles.
Okay.
3 hours and 45 minutes. So it's like
A little past Knoxville.
it's directly. You have to go to Knoxville and then you go like directly south.
Okay.
So right down 81.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. All right. Well, we got our first commit to the 2023 class. I'm sure plenty more to come over the next few months.
Probably there'll be a big contingent of them at the spring game.
Yes. Obviously, a big recruiting day coming up in a few weeks for Brent Pry's staff. Before we take a break, Dave, you got anything in the fourth chair?
Yeah. A couple questions. First, Will Malcolm dropped the link for the posters in the chat, and Charles Malden asked, "Are the ordered posters will ship when?"
So they've actually already started shipping. They have the tubes, they have the posters printed, they got them all signed. So they've started the process of shipping. I'll be honest, I haven't had a chance to ask the printer what tracking will be provided, if any. But I know that they're going to start shipping today, because one of the priorities we have is to get the funds to Justyn Mutts as fast as possible.
Yep.
And to do that, the printer needs to ship, and then the money comes to the printer, and then it comes to us, and then it goes to Mutts. So I'll answer with, I don't know how long it takes to stuff one of these things in a tube. I can tell you it was tedious to number them. I can't imagine, putting them in the tubes. So I think it will take some time, and I'm not sure what sort of tracking will be provided.
Cool. All right. Two questions. First, GJP asks, who's going to win the starting quarterback job? And I know that's a very open question, but Chris, from what you've seen, what are your thoughts?
In passing drills, the first one out there is Wells.
Okay.
That's what I've seen consistently every time I've been at practice. He can make any throw on the field so smooth. Just he from a pure arm talent standpoint, he reminds me of Ryan Willis. And before anybody starts bashing Willis, remember that he plays for the Chicago Bears now.
Yeah,
he's pretty freaking good. We just botched his development. Okay, so that's who he's not. Wells isn't as tall, but from an arm talent standpoint, that's who he reminds me of. I thought Brad Glenn had an interesting quote about Jason Brown. He said, Brown's got a good arm, but like his completions aren't as pretty. Like he grinds them out. Which, watching his South Carolina tape, I see what he's talking about. It's hard. Just go back and watch some of his highlights, and that's a good way to phrase it. I can't explain it on a podcast. You have to go look for yourself. I think Wells is the front runner. He's just got more experience at the division.
It's hard to argue with what, 5,000 career passing yards, like 55
in
or
2
more.
years.
Yeah, his last year at Marshall would have been second in Virginia Tech history.
Single season.
Single season passing. And that was in 13 games. Gerard Evans has the record in 14 games. And Grant Wells was just like 100 yards behind him.
It's like 100 yards or less.
Like his completion percentage was like 67%, which would also be a Virginia Tech record. And I know that's Marshall competition, but I mean, this guy's got major talent, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And he's also has 3 years remaining. You know, he's already started 2 years. He's a 2-year starter at Marshall, and one of those was a COVID year, so it doesn't count. He could potentially be our starter this year, 2023, and 2024. Wow. So I think I'm not rooting for either guy. I think he's more likely to win the job. Yeah. And I think it would be more beneficial for Virginia Tech long term if he did win the job, because then you have a returning starter next year and then potentially the year after, as opposed to, you know, Brown starting this year and then he's gone, he's done, and then you start all over again.
Which has been the pattern at Tech for 5 or 6 years.
I want some continuity at quarterback.
So, so the one downside with Wells was the touchdown to interception ratio. And didn't somebody ask the one of the coaches about the turnovers and how that sort of thing's been going?
Yeah, Teal actually.
Yeah,
David Teal asked him just about the ball security. And they basically said through 9 or so practices, scrimmages, they've only each thrown like 1 interception.
Yeah,
and Bright Glenn said he's been very impressed.
He threw 13 picks last year, but if you look at it from interception per or attempts per interception standpoint, he had a better number than Brown did at South Carolina.
Right.
Brown started 4 games for South Carolina and threw 6 picks in those 4 games.
Yeah.
So it's not like, I mean, so Wells had more, but he also started 3 times as many games, right? And threw about well over twice, maybe 3 times as many passes. So,
and I think there was an aversion in the Fuente coaching staff to putting quarterbacks in a position to turn it over.
Oh, absolutely,
you know?
Absolutely.
And it's possible that this staff will want their quarterbacks to be more aggressive, make throws, and you might wind up seeing more interceptions.
Yeah, it's possible. I will also say that. Stop me if you've ever heard this before. Marshall fans don't like their offensive coordinator. Okay, very few fan bases do. All right, because Wells, this is the second quarterback in a row that they've had that they've had a quarterback start as a freshman and play well as a freshman, and then he throws more picks in his second year than he did his first year.
Yeah.
Right. So this seems to be a trend with their offensive coordinator / quarterbacks coach that they don't like. So when you look at Wells' interception last year, if the Marshall fans are right, then that's a Marshall thing. That's not a Wells thing.
Well, we'll find out.
We will find out.
Assuming he becomes a starter, we'll find out soon.
And that's going to be something everybody wants to watch next Saturday in the spring game, see how that competition starts to sort out.
He's also the more mobile. You know, he's a guy that rushed a couple years ago for 300 yards or so, which doesn't sound like a lot, but Brown had negative rushing yards at South Carolina. Yeah. He is very much a pocket passer. You're not going to get anything out of the running game with him. Yeah. He's got some escapability to a certain extent, but then he makes throws downfield and things like that. He's not going to run away from you and things. So you could get more out of a quarterback design run probably out of Wells than you could Brown. That said, if Brown beats him out, then more power to it.
You're going to have a better quarterback in 2022, no matter what.
And
whoever wins the competition.
You will have a better backup quarterback too.
You know? All right. Well, we're going to get to more questions at the end of the show. We ran a little bit long on the first half.
You want me to ask now? There's a football question, or
yeah, you know what? Sure. Let's get all the football out of the way.
And the first thing I wanted to say is, Pry did say. And Pry and Glenn and Bone were all in agreement that if there is a starting quarterback, like for sure, they will name him. Mm-hmm. Okay. If there's not, they're not going to name him. I feel like that's important. Since we're on football, I figure I'll ask. Sam Sweeney says, are there any possibilities to get a solid 2 deep at defensive tackle or offensive tackle or any other areas in need through the spring portal?
Through the portal? You know, we'll have to see. There will be more attrition for every school after the spring. Yeah. Everybody's got to get down to 85. Some guys are going to look at their playing time after the spring and see that the writing's on the wall, and they're going to the portal. Blah blah blah. I definitely think offensive tackle, a natural offensive tackle, is something that Tech could take a look at. There have been times when Tech has been running with two walk-on redshirt freshmen as their backup offensive tackle this spring. Bob Schick was the backup left tackle today, but I even think he's a natural guard. So there's, to be honest with you, I'm not even sure Silas Janzy's a natural tackle. He might be a better fitted guard. I don't know, but right now he's a starting left tackle. I would love to add a true offensive tackle in the portal over the summer. And you've got to be very careful with your numbers. Like, you got to, because you've got to get rid of guys or have guys transfer, to get down to the 85 man. There has to be attrition to get down to the 85 man spot, the 85 man number. So you don't want to be adding guys unless you know they can help you.
Yeah.
Because then that's more guys that have to leave, right? And sometimes attrition's good, but you don't want too much if you can avoid it.
And with regards to the portal, there's so many players in the portal these days that I think the likelihood is that if there's a tackle out there in the portal that Virginia Tech likes, it'll be because he's at a school that one of Virginia Tech's coaches was at, or it was a kid that he recruited out of high school that went somewhere else. You're not just going to randomly pick somebody from the portal.
He asked about defensive tackle also, right?
Yeah.
That was in there. So Tech, I'm actually have started writing a defensive tackle article, and I've run the number of snaps, and obviously Nerel Pollard's got a lot of experience. Mario Kendricks has a lot of experience. Josh Fuga has a lot of experience. Even Panay got over 100 snaps last year, which is a lot for a guy who was a freshman. I think, I don't know that like the scheme fit is. I think for Pollard, this is definitely a better scheme than the previous one, the J-Ham scheme. I think that for Panay, it's definitely a better schematic fit than the old scheme. I don't know if it is for Fugo, but he can still be a solid player. At any rate, those are your top 4 defensive tackles this year, and I'm fine with that. The question for me is there going to be a 5th defensive tackle, or is that it? Nigel Williams, who was the walk-on defensive tackle, who's actually had to play a little bit. He was a defensive end today, which I think is a better fit for him. Can Goodner be that guy? Like I said, I don't. Givens doesn't strike me as a twitch one-gap defensive tackle. I know he wants to play defense, but he doesn't strike me. I think he could have played on the defensive line for Justyn Hamilton, but I don't think for the Brent Price scheme that he's the right fit for that. Can a Braylon Moore be that guy? Desmond Mooney was a guy who redshirted last year, but again, he was recruited for the old scheme. Are you going to have to burn somebody's red shirt to be the 5th defensive tackle? Can a guy like
that is a position where you don't
want to.
Yeah,
I mean, I think Rashad Purnell's a heck of a good prospect, but I'd rather redshirt him.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's something that has to shake itself out. Now, don't get me wrong. If the numbers work and Tech could find a proven defensive tackle that is a fit for this scheme, I would certainly take him. But at the same time, I like Panay. I think he's a flexible guy, and I mean physically flexible. You get on his Instagram and you watch him; he's kickboxing.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So you're talking about a defensive tackle that can kick his leg up head height and things like that. I mean, I just think he's a really good fit for the scheme, and I think at this point he needs to play to get better. And I don't know if like blocking him right now would necessarily be good for his long-term projection. It depends on who's available and whether they're a schematic fit, I think.
Yep, could see some movement in from the transfer portal. Definitely going to see some out from the football program in the next few months. In the second half, we're going to talk transfer portal a little bit more on the men's basketball side. We're also going to check in on red hot softball and baseball. Stay with us. We're going to take a break. Be right back with more here on episode 232 of the Tech Sideline podcast. Stay with us. Welcome back into episode 232 of the Tech Sideline podcast, brought to you by the Southeast Regional Training Center. Thanks for listening or watching. A reminder, if you are on our YouTube channel, leave a comment or question in the chat. We'll get to those at the end of the show. We've got Will, Chris, David. I'm Jake, Malcolm behind the scenes. David and Will have swapped if you were on the YouTube channel, so now David is across the way, Will in the fourth chair. We're going to go through softball, baseball, and some men's basketball transfer rumors, who could possibly be coming in. But let's start with softball. 27-4, 11-0 in the ACC, top 5 in the country. Not much else you can say. Their 16-game losing streak winning streak, was snapped on Monday against UCF in 11 innings. But still, this team proving over and over again that they could possibly end up in the Women's College World Series this year.
And I think you should note about that game, I believe Tech had 12 hits and stranded 10 runners. Yep. So it's not that they weren't, the bats weren't going. It was that, just unopportune timing. But I mean, this team is rolling, as we're going to talk about. Big matchup this upcoming week. Top 5 matchup.
Biggest one of the year.
At number 5 or at number 2. At number 2, Florida State, Virginia Tech, and Florida State both in the top 5. But I mean, I think this is kind of what we expected, right? Like, yeah. Keely Rochard, Emma Lemley. Emma Lemley has emerged as this dynamic pitcher, and it's this really duo that I would not want to face if I'm any ACC team. And Keely Rochard just won ACC Pitcher of the Week again.
Yeah, Virginia Tech's number 3 pitcher has pitched a no-hitter.
Yes,
think about that.
The top 3 have all pitched no-hitters,
right? So they're not going to have to go, to the NCAA tournament this year and just throw Keely every single inning.
Yeah.
Which has to take its toll mentally when you feel like you have to be perfect as a pitcher, and then you have to pitch the next game. And,
she essentially, in last year against UCLA, she threw the entirety of games 1 and 2, and then pretty much through game 3 until she couldn't anymore. So having Emma Lemley there provides a really balanced attack. And they, I believe, through 25 innings, they only allowed 5 runs all weekend.
Well, and you look at that Sunday doubleheader, they went full 14 innings, gave up just 1 hit combined because Keely had a no-hitter, Lemley gave up just 1, and struck out 26 batters.
And earlier in the year when they lost to Alabama, they weren't hitting.
Yes.
Even when they were winning earlier in the season, the bats didn't exactly get off to a hot start, but now they're hitting. More like you.
A lot of the bats have started to come along.
Yes, Emma Ritter leading the way, batting .442 as a sophomore, and then Bree Peck, true freshman, .366, 7 home runs, and it seems like a lot of that has come along over the last couple of weeks. When I was calling the games a few weeks ago against UNC, I got to talk to Coach DeMore and asked kind of what's happened to her, and he said she believes in herself now. It's like she believes she belongs at this level. And it's showing. She leads the team in home runs as a true freshman.
Yeah, when Chip Grubb, our softball beat writer, as I'm sure as he told me, I think one of the big reasons why Tech started hitting a lot better was because Pete DeMore he coached third base originally, and then he moved into the dugout. And just it's a lot easier to communicate with your players from, as you talk to them before they walk out to the plate,
and when they come back,
when they come back, versus standing over there on third base and trying to send them hand signals,
right. And you can't really make as many adjustments because once you get back in, they're heading out to the field.
And I mean, I'm sure he's looking for certain things from the pitcher and catcher, while he's watching his batters. But when you're doing that in the dugout, and you can sit there and turn to your batter and go, hey, you see what they're doing here, be wary of this or whatnot. And, Tech has flown through a lot of these past couple series. And, yes, the 16-game win streak was snapped, at number 20 UCF. We should
in 11 innings.
It's a good team.
Yes.
And it was in 11 innings, and Tech absolutely blew UCF out of the water in the first 2 games. I know the score line was what? It was really close in the first game.
It was, I believe, 1 or 2 to nothing in the first game. 7-0 in the second game.
But when you have Keely Rochard on the mound, I don't. You feel like you're pretty safe. So this team it's very well rounded, and I think it's exactly what we've expected.
Yeah, definitely seems like that they At this point, it'd be a surprise if they were anything but a 1 seed.
Yeah.
I mean, they would have
hosting
to
a super regional.
right, hosting a super regional too. Exactly. So
I believe they're number 2 in the RPI.
that's
They,
probably
they were
right.
number 1 for a while.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, and they may have dropped down, but biggest series of the year coming up this weekend in Tallahassee. Number 2 Florida State, number 4 Virginia Tech. Hokies are still the only undefeated team in ACC play, but this series could decide who ends up as the 1 seed in the ACC. Seminoles have their combination of 2 pitchers who are great as well. Catherine Sandercock is 18-0 with a 1.02 ERA. Danielle Watson behind her 11-2, a 1.54 ERA. So this could be very similar to that Alabama series.
Low scoring series.
Yeah.
1-0, 2-0, something like that.
Yeah, but imagine if Tech's trying to play this series and they have to throw Keely Richard. Like last year.
Keely Richard
Every
all
game.
3 days.
Yeah, you've got a very capable Emma Lemley and Ivan Rosenberry, even if you need it. You know, like there's so much talent in that room, and I think honestly it's going to come down to, you know, who can get more hit. I mean, I guess that's diamond sports, but like, you know,
maybe a game with 3 total hits or
just
something.
like the Alabama games.
Who's going to get the timely hit?
Yes.
Yeah, like the Alabama games. You know,
Yes.
3-0 score line. You know,
And Alabama scored in the 6th inning in one of them.
And Tech had the bases loaded in one of those games.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's something, you know, Tech has seemed to be able to get a lot of runners on. It's can you score them?
Yes.
And I think that's kind of that'll like go push them over the hump a little bit. But I mean, it's going to be a really fun weekend. Like three top 5 college softball games. I mean, imagine if we're sitting here talking next week, you know, previewing the spring game, but Virginia Tech softball just won a series at number 2 Florida State. I mean, that's huge for your resume.
Yes,
and softball is home next week too for the spring
Yes.
game.
With
right?
Virginia.
With
So it's
Virginia.
baseball, right?
So Virginia Thursday, Friday, Saturday next weekend. So
And
that's
Virginia hasn't scored on Virginia Tech in how many years?
They scored 1 last year.
Well,
they did
last-
score 1 last year, but I believe that's the only run they've scored since about 2017. So
You know, I'm going to look that up.
I looked it up the other week because I was talking to one of my friends about it. I was like, I don't think Virginia's scored on Tech softball in 5 years. So that should be fun. Fans in town for the spring game. You got games.
Softball, baseball.
Softball, baseball has Miami, I believe,
Yeah,
next weekend.
That sounds about
so,
right. So and that's a top that's Miami's a top 25 team.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Tech baseball is doing rather well against top 25 teams right now.
Well,
it
let's
seems.
talk about it. Baseball.
Speaking of bats getting hot,
Speaking of bats getting hot,
Dude,
yes.
Jack Hurley, what's his batting
Jack
average?
Hurley is batting a cool 464.
464.
Leads America.
Leads the nation.
24 game hitting streak. Right?
10. Yes, all 24 games this year. He has a hit, 10 home runs, 34 RBIs.
Cade Hunter's also hitting over 400. He has a 24 game on base
Yes,
streak.
both of those guys, every single game, have gotten on
And
base.
it's just it's nuts. And now Chris Hirons, I told you before the show, Chris Hirons is writing a story that they'll come out either today or tomorrow. I asked him if he would, you know, if he think it would be worthwhile, because I think so, to write a story on, okay, Virginia Tech's doing well, but can the team keep it going? Because last year we saw how hot they got at the beginning of the year and then fell off a cliff.
Right.
And he talked to the guys after they beat Marshall 6-2
Yes.
on Tuesday. Got some good quotes, so keep an eye out for that. But
Yeah.
I mean, they won the 1-game series at Notre Dame.
Yes. Took
Then
2
they
out of
beat-
3 at North Carolina.
First ever
First-
series win in Chapel Hill.
Yep.
I mean, this team is rolling, and it's not just the hitting. Like Drew Hackenberg has been really, really good
Oh my
on
gosh.
the mound.
5-0.
He has as many walks as
Innings
starts,
pitched.
right?
Or
Starts,
not as innings pitched.
So
that would be bad.
That's
As starts.
insane. Yeah, that would be bad. And it's very important to not walk people in baseball generally.
Yeah.
So the walk almost always gets you, but especially in Blacksburg. Look, the ball's going to fly in so many games here because of the wind this time of year. So you're going to give up a few homers here and there just simply because of that. Just don't walk people in front of that guy who hits the home run.
Yeah.
Let him be a solo shot is fine. You can overcome that. You can't overcome a 3-run homer a lot of times. That's why he's been really impressive to me. Is he's just not walking people, keeping them off the base pass, and that's very impressive. And I think Tech is in a better position this year because they're overall a more experienced team. I remember going to a game last year when they played Florida State, and Tech won. Hurley actually homered in that game. But I want to say like Tech started 7 freshmen. That
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the one non-freshman might have been Tanner Thomas.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's probably right. So, and we've talked about this before. The scouting report gets out after a while.
Yeah.
So after 3 or 4 ACC series, after you've got tape on all these guys and you've got scouting report, you just tell your pitchers, stop throwing these freshman fastballs. See if they can hit a changeup or a breaking ball.
Yeah.
Right? So you saw a whole bunch of guys drop off at the end of the last season, and then combine that with the injuries Tech had with their pitching staff.
Yeah.
And there wasn't much they could do. This year, I think the pitching staff is deeper. I mean, they're getting good midweek starts this year.
And it's crazy because a lot of these guys, I mean, John Sheff kind of hit the portal for a handful of pitchers.
Yep.
And some unproven, some proven, but like it's a lot of guys that have never really gotten reps at like a D1 level before, and they've been impressive.
Really good.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, we haven't even talked about Gavin Cross, who might be a top 10 pick in the MLB draft.
Well, and he struggled early on, but he's starting to come around over the last couple of weeks.
Now, if he's a top 10 pick in the MLB draft, that would make him the highest drafted. You could make an argument that he's the best Virginia Tech baseball player ever.
Yep.
I mean, based on where he's drafted.
Yes.
I mean, yes, you can go back and look and you can say Chad Pinder because he's played so long in the majors, or Mike Williams or people like that. But as far as like the entire college career, what they did in college and where they were drafted, you could make that argument.
I think we got some backlash last time we said that on the podcast, but it's true. If he ends up going ahead, Joe Saunders was 12th overall.
12th or 13th, something
so
like that.
if Gavin Cross
He
is a
could be
top
up
10
there.
pick.
And I think it's important to mention like the guys that were like the guys that were key contributors, but like a guy like Nick Biddison, who went through a lot of he went through a slump last year after being injured
Missed
for a
lot
while.
of time.
He's been really good so far this year.
Well, Tanner Schobel as well. Gavin Cross and Tanner Schobel went back-to-back twice on Friday
against UNC
against
pitching.
UNC.
Yeah, and then I think that's important. Chris Hirons tweeted this. It's not like Virginia Tech is hitting like this against bad pitchers. Like these are some of the best pitchers. Notre Dame and North Carolina, some of the best
They
pitchers
ran
in the
off
ACC.
both of their aces within 4 innings, I want to say, over the last 2 weekends. Big series coming up this weekend as well. Top 25 NC State team, Tommy Tanks, coming to town. So we've got Tommy White and Jack Hurley in the same ballpark. That's going to be electric.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
The two probably the 2 hottest guys in the country.
No doubt. And
Tommy's cooled down a little bit.
He has.
He had like 9 home
how
runs
could
in a
you
week.
not cool down?
Yeah. It's, I mean, he's batting 356, I believe I wrote down. 12 home runs. But it's hard. I think he was batting 500 with like 8 home runs in the first week of the season. So
yeah. I was watching some highlights of Tech the other day, and when Hurley homered, and I was just impressed with his bat speed. He just really seems to have a quick bat. Obviously, if you're hitting 464,
you're gonna have one.
You're gonna have one. But it was really impressive. Like when I saw him swing, it just seemed exceptionally fast to me. And I'm not a baseball scout by any stretch of the imagination, but he's a sophomore, right? So we got another year of Jack Hurley.
Was he a COVID freshman?
I don't
no,
think so.
I think he was a true freshman
last year. Yeah, so
he was on Packer and Durham this morning.
I saw that.
We got an answer to a question many have been wondering. If he faced Keely
Rochard,
Rochard, could he hit her? He said absolutely not. He said he watches her pitch and it's like 20 strikeouts a game. He said I'd have no chance.
Yeah, but I think it's important here to mention we were talking about it before. The Directors Cup. They announced the updated standings for the Directors Cup. After, because they announce it, this is Learfield Directors Cup, they announce it after fall sports and then after winter sports, and then in kind of like midsummer they announce like what happened after all the year, after the entire year. And after the winter season, Virginia Tech is 19th in the Directors Cup,
which would be their highest
ever finish is 28th.
Right,
and the spring sport's looking good so far.
Right,
and you got baseball and softball who are looking good.
Right now, if softball makes a deep run, and if baseball makes the NCAA tournament,
and don't count out track and field either.
Track
exactly, you've got outdoor track.
Yes,
rolling right now.
The women's team
too.
finished 6th nationally, so
Yeah.
definitely a lot to look forward to the rest of the spring. We've got One more sport I want to talk about before we finish up here on episode 232, men's basketball. We talked a lot about Justyn Mutts and Keve Aluma early on in the podcast about whether they would want to stay or go. If they do leave, there's some options in the transfer portal that have kind of been linked to Virginia Tech. Obviously, some of the big ones. Ali from Akron. I believe that's how you pronounce it.
He's on the all-name team.
So, yeah.
Noah Carter from Northern Iowa. He was
I believe he's coming to take a visit.
He's visiting for the spring game, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, and he was all Missouri Valley, Missouri Valley, correct?
Yeah, because he's Northern Iowa.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jake Stevens.
And I think Noah's got 2 years left. Too,
I believe.
right?
Yes.
I believe so. Yeah, and then Jake Stevens, VMI, who averaged 7-footer, who averaged like
20 and 10, basically.
yeah, I was gonna say 19 and 9. Like,
and shot 49 from 3.
Yeah, he can shoot the three too,
and average 3 assists per game.
Yeah,
and he's played in Castle Coliseum.
He
a few
has.
times.
Last season he had 11
I
points,
was gonna say,
5
you gonna list off
rebounds,
all the
3
stats?
assists, 3 blocks, 2 steals. Something like that.
You looked it
was
up,
his
I
box
think.
score. I believe that was it.
So it feels like the backcourt is kind of loaded. You've got a lot of options back there, but front court, there's some insurance policies if Mutts and Luma decide to move on.
Right. Now, the key here is timing. Like, you don't want them dragging out their decisions until June, and there's nobody left in the portal to take. So there's got to be constant communication between the parties there. You know, Mike Young talking to both of those guys, getting a feel for where they are and everything like that. What is Noah's last name again?
Carter.
Noah Carter. That's it.
Yeah.
I keep wanting to call him Noah Kane. He's like a UVA football player. Noah Carter. Noah King was a Penn State football player. Anyway,
I can tell that Chris is starting to get older because he's starting to mix
I'm
some
starting to
names
listen.
up.
Noah Carter, he's a skilled guy. Like, he can pass it kind of like Mutts. Like, he can
So first
replace
of all,
Mutts' assist.
he's 6'6".
Yeah, and I forget
he's 6'6" from Northern Iowa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He averaged about 15 a game last year.
Yeah. Mutts is also 6'6", even though he's listed at 6'7". If you look at that picture of him and Elizabeth Kitley holding up their trophies for AC Scholar, they're exactly the same height. Yeah.
Maybe they add the hair on top.
Yeah, but Carter could be somebody who can kind of fill that Mutts role. Right. But I think, again, it comes down to this timing. And you mentioned the backcourt. It's funny because I texted Chris the other day and I asked about MJ Collins because I was like, there's no way, like, some of these guys aren't going to play, right? You've got Sean Padula. Rodney Rice is probably the guy that would take over some ball handling responsibilities. Then you got Hunter Couture, Naheem Aline, who are both going to be seniors, and then Darius Maddox and MJ Collins. That's 6 guys in the backcourt. You're loaded. You don't need anywhere else. But what happens is if Keve Aluma and Justyn Mutts end up leaving, you have a hole in the front court. And you have nobody there with experience, nobody that's started a game before.
Right.
David Gasson and John Ojiako are your most experienced players. They've both played in, like, I think 57 career games, but they've never started a game.
Right.
You know, and
I like Gasson, but overall those two would not provide the same production.
And I think it goes back to the timing. And Keve Aluma and Justyn Mutts have big decisions to make. Do you want to stay an extra year in college? We were just talking about the NIL deal. We don't know whether Justyn Mutts is going to come back or not, but, you know, if there's potential NIL stuff in the works, who knows?
Yeah.
You know, but Mike Young trying to, I guess, pull strings a little bit and make sure he knows, because you don't want to lose out on a guy. You know, if, like, Mike Young's sitting there and saying, okay, well, I've got a feeling that Keve and Justyn aren't going to come back, and I've got a feeling that, you know, we've got Noah Carter or you know, guys that want to potentially come. You got to make sure that the guys have made their decision before the other guys have. You know, you don't want to lose out on a guy. You don't want to lose out on a guy because the current guys haven't made a decision. But obviously, those are the guys that just help your program win an ACC championship.
Right.
So it's a tough balancing act.
You don't really want to speed them up. You don't want to put pressure on them because they just want an ACC for you. Mike Young has a great relationship with those guys, so that's why they pay him the big bucks. I'm not going to worry about it.
And honestly, I would. You know, and I say this, I would not be surprised if either of them came back.
I wouldn't either. I'm not expecting both of them to come back.
No.
That would be awesome. Can you imagine if they did? That would be awesome.
I was telling Will earlier, you essentially just lose Storm Murphy.
Right. Yes. No, yeah, it's the same team plus,
and you have Sean Padula with another year under his belt.
Yeah, and you add Rodney Rice. Yeah.
You would think ideally, obviously, both come back, or one comes back and you get one of these guys out of the portal. I think that would be the ideal scenario for Mike Young at this point.
Yeah, but I think, again, it's going to come down to timing because there could potentially be a point. Imagine if both of them, the guys announce, okay, we're leaving. Well, then you've got 2 open scholarships. Because right now, if they both came back, Tech's at 13 scholarships, the maximum. And also, I think it's important to mention that there's probably going to be a little bit of attrition. I would expect maybe one guy to transfer out.
I mean, it'd be shocking if nobody did.
But because that's college basketball nowadays. Yeah. But if Keve Aluma and Justyn Mutts leave, you've got 2 open scholarship spots as it stands today. So there's potentially going to be an opportunity where, you look a little bit more appealing. But I think it all hinges on this one decision or 2 decisions that these guys are making. And if you're Mike Young, you're kind of just sitting around and you want what's in best interest for these guys.
I think in football with 85 scholarships and the vast amount of guys you bring into your program these days, even with the transfer portal, it's still high school kids.
Yeah.
So you still say, yes, recruiting is very important for college football. Basketball, I don't even think you have to. I don't even know if you should use the term recruiting anymore. It should just be roster management.
That's essentially what it is.
Right. It's only 13 scholarships. You're gonna have a lot of portal guys. That's really what it is. Like Virginia Tech might never sign like a top 4 recruiting class in the ACC, but who
if
cares?
you hit the portal part,
yeah.
And I think it's important to mention that if Justyn and Keve end up staying, you don't need anybody. But if one leaves or 2 leaves, then you need a replacement. You need a guy that can start because you have nobody behind them that has experience, I should say. Because I think we saw Gasson, as I wrote earlier this week and last week, 2 subscription articles on Tech Sideline just about postseason basketball thoughts about the season and this upcoming offseason. It's important to note Gasson turned into he improved so much over the course of the season.
And you got to remember, he was playing the 4 and the 5.
But him starting and having to play 33 minutes a game next year,
you have to get a little stronger.
It's not ideal.
Right. And you would think Gasson and maybe if Ojiako starts getting more minutes by the end of the season, maybe they're ready for that. But I don't think you want to roll into the first game of the year with those guys as your starting 4 and 5. Right. So it'll be very interesting to see how the roster shakes out. Obviously, the first domino that has to fall is whether Mutts and Aluma are going to stay. And we'll probably learn that news over the next month or so, we would assume. And we'll certainly talk about that as it develops. Before we get out of here, Will is monitoring the chat in the 4th chair. Have we gotten any good questions over there?
The chat is pretty quiet in the second half. Matthew Morrison reports that he got a tracking number for the posters. So those of you who have ordered them, yes, you will receive acknowledgement and a tracking number. So that's good. And S1KE, which I presume is pronounced psych. This is really a question for me. Is this just a special occasion with the Mutts posters, or are you guys looking to possibly do more NIL deals in the future? We'll just have to see how things shake out.
Like if Dwayne Lofton comes down with a dramatic catch to beat Clemson in the ACC title game, and our photographer is right there, then Dwayne Lofton's going to get himself in an NIL deal too, right?
Picture Trey Turner's catch against UVA a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Or like as you guys were talking about earlier, like imagine if they had this back like when Deron Washington teabagged Greg Paulus. I would have made my parents buy me that.
No doubt.
Like I was the biggest Deron Washington. I would have made my parents buy me that. But yeah, I guess it's...
I would have put a picture in the corner of a guy with a cup just dipping the tea with a little smile on his face. Or get Deron to do it. Get Deron to just, I'm making tea.
You could probably get him to do that now. Just take a picture, make a poster.
Jesus. Well, somebody else owns the right to that photo, but you can find out who it is and purchase it. A serious answer is NIL is kind of the wild, wild west right now.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of groups that are being created, at least a couple, to do NIL deals for Virginia Tech. And so we'll have to see how that stuff shakes out. And so, I mean, certainly this went well It was a lot of time spent, and we are not a poster production company here at Tech Sideline. We're a media entity that covers Virginia Tech athletics.
Yeah, so there's only so much we can do on a project like that takes 2 weeks, and we don't make a dime out of it. I mean, we do have to run our business here.
And so, and also I've talked to the printer that did this for us, and they might be open to a storefront where you can go and buy posters. This whole signed thing, that was a lot of work.
Yeah.
But certainly there's print on demand companies that you just, we can whip out a like we could do a Dax Hollyfield poster within just a few hours and have something ready to sell. If you want him to sign it, that's a whole different animal.
Yes.
So that's kind of a long-winded answer. We'll just see how things shake out, because this is a very public thing, and these groups that want to do NIL are probably sitting there thinking to themselves, "Let's have a poster shop." In which case, if they like any of the pictures we've got, we'll sell them the rights to that. Have at it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of not really sure. And somebody asked me that yesterday, and I said, back when PCs, and I remember this because I'm old enough, when personal computers started being a thing, the IBM PC came out. There were literally dozens to hundreds of companies that popped up and started producing PCs. And it was the wild, wild west for a while, and they all consolidated down to about 3 or 4 manufacturers. IBM, probably HP, Compaq, Dell, and after a couple of years, it was all kind of centralized and focused. And I think that will also happen with NIL, provide the NCAA doesn't wake up one day and change their mind about things,
They won't change their mind, but you could see a rules change
Yes.
to a certain extent.
If it starts to impact competition more than they had anticipated, possibly.
But I do think this sort of thing will be available, whether it's us or somebody else.
Perfect. Well, I think that just about wraps it up. A full show today. We covered a lot of stuff.
Well, one more thing, but I'm not sure we can answer this one. Sam Sweeney says, and I don't know how closely you guys. I bet Chip could answer half of this question. Where did it go? Any updates to softball/baseball recruiting? Do you guys cover that at all?
That's a Chip Chris question.
Yeah.
I haven't heard much about recruiting from either side.
Yeah, that's
recruiting is one of those things. Like, Jack Hurley's an awesome player, but unless you subscribe to Perfect Game or something like
Baseball
that,
America,
you're probably not going to know a ton until those guys show up on campus.
Yeah, I mean, I know Chip wrote a story kind of at the beginning of the year on all the newcomers that were coming in, just the recruiting, or it was when they signed. When all the players signed, Tech wrote. So I believe we do have a recruiting article on the site. If you go through the softball
this year's freshmen,
for
yes.
this year,
wait a minute,
for next year,
for next year's freshmen, I believe.
I remember seeing that. I think too.
But if you have any questions, go on the message board and ask Chip Grubb, because
we have a dedicated softball message board.
Yes,
yeah,
new softball message board,
and Chip will answer any questions.
Chip is monitoring those constantly, I believe.
Chip
so
never sleeps.
I saw he was at Busch Gardens today.
Oh my gosh!
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I don't know. He said he rode there's a new roller coaster. He said
I saw that.
He rode it.
He was. Let's see. So he was down there for the UCF series. He's probably going over to Tallahassee. I think he was actually in Orlando.
Yeah, he was in Orlando. He's at He went to Universal.
And
so he's just staying down there for the whole week. Then
there's another Busch Gardens down there too.
Oh, that's what he
there's
probably
two
went
of
to Busch Gardens, Tampa.
Yeah,
that's probably what
it.
It
would make no sense to come all the way back to Virginia and then go all the way
Chip's
back
Florida
to Florida.
vacation.
Yeah, as somebody who grew up 15 minutes from Busch Gardens, Williamsburg.
Yes.
That's true.
So anyway, good show today.
Yeah, great show. What do we have coming up on Tech Sideline over the next few days?
We got Friday Q&A. I've got 3 more positions to do for football. So I got defensive tackle, linebacker, defensive back. So they'll all come out in rapid succession next week.
And if we can, we're still waiting to hear on whether or not we're going to be able to go watch Saturday's football scrimmage.
And by we, he means media. It's not something that's going to
not
be
open to fans.
Sorry. Yeah, but if we do,
it's not really something we can report on, though, if we're there. It's just more for our knowledge.
Yeah,
just so we could see it.
But we'll, again, next Wednesday we'll get to talk. It'll be the final media thing before the spring game, and then Thursday, my guess is we'll probably have open practice again. So there'll be a lot of football stuff coming your way.
Perfect. And then again, reminder, next Monday, Tony Roby coming on the podcast.
Right.
It'll be me hosting it. Will be on set, and then Jack Brizendine, our wrestling writer, will be in the fourth chair. So don't miss that. That'll be Monday morning, I believe.
Monday morning, we don't have a time yet.
Okay.
We'll set that later, and we are working on Pete Demore. We had hoped to have Pete next week, but after Florida State series and before the UVA series. But he's really, because that UVA series starts on Thursday.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
he's really pressed for time. They're at Liberty on Tuesday.
Yes.
So the deal is
quick
he's at
turnaround.
Liberty on Tuesday, then he's got to do Blacksburg Sports Club on Wednesday, and then they play UVA on Thursday.
Yeah. So
So-
quick turnaround.
Busy week.
So once they're done, so I looked it up. They've won something like 12 in a row over UVA by a combined score of, I believe it was 72-12, and the last 6 have been, or something like that, have been a combined score of 49-1. so by now UVA, I think UVA is better this year, but my
little-
joke
a little
is
bit better.
That's the thing is, so is Tech.
that is
Let's just
true.
warn
That's
fans,
true.
you probably don't want to show up late to those UVA games.
because they may be
Yeah.
They may be over.
Don't show
faster
up in
than
like the
expected.
4th inning, because as soon as you sit down with your popcorn, it's going to end.
Yeah.
All right. Well, again, reminder, Tony Roby on the podcast Monday. We hope to get Pete Demore on sometime soon as well. But that'll wrap things up on episode 232 of the Tech Sideline podcast. I want to thank everybody on set. Will Stewart was across the way. Now he's in the fourth chair, founder and general manager. Had a lot of good insight on the Justyn Mutts NIL deal. David Cunningham across the way, our managing editor. Great job on the set in the second half, going around the horn on some Tech sports. Chris Coleman, to my right, lead analyst and columnist for Tech Sideline. We spent a lot of time in the fall following the Braves World Series run, so they start their title defense tonight. Good luck.
Somebody
They face the Reds today.
they do. This is only the third time since 1890 that the Reds have started.
Is
the
today
season
opening
on the ro-
day?
on the
Today is
ro-
opening day.
Yeah.
And so the Masters is drowning that out.
Well,
right?
here's
Yes.
your crazy
Tiger
stat.
a little bit.
Your crazy stat of the day as a baseball fan is this is just the third time since 1890 that the Reds have opened a season on the road.
Wow,
They're normally the
that's
traditional team. They're the oldest team in baseball. So they're normally the traditional team that starts at home.
So like Dallas and Detroit always host Thanksgiving
Thank you.
football
Yes.
games.
Kind of like that for baseball.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, my Rays don't play today, so
Neither do my Tigers. We're hoping for an above 500 record for the first time since I was about 15 years old. So
And for the fourth chair over here, let's go Mets go.
there we go. We got our 4 teams. Malcolm behind the scenes. Does
Malcolm-
Malcolm have a team?
Malcolm
Okay.
didn't have a team.
All right, we're going to get him a team. But
Malcolm says, eh.
all right, well, with that, we'll wrap things up. I am your host, Jake Lyman. Thank you for tuning in here on episode 232 of the Tech Sideline podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.